don't keep up with the Joneses. Have you ever heard that old saying?
Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
I don't know who the Joneses are or how they got so fast, but one thing I've learned from studying personal finance for years now is that you should never try to keep up with them. They're like Roadrunner, those Joneses. Meep, meep. Roadrunner, I hardly know her. No, I don't like that. It sounds like I'm chasing a woman with my car. Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses is a good rule. Don't try to measure the quality of your life by looking at what other people have or what vacations they go on or what they post on Instagram or whatever. Because A, you're different people. And B, for all you know, the Joneses are trying to keep up with the Smiths who have nicer things than them, and the Smiths are trying to keep up with the dingle hoppers who have nicer things than them, and it all becomes this weird race to the top of consumption and credit limits. It's an expensive way to live, and more importantly, it's probably not going to make you that happy. But I've started to notice it feels like the same people that tell us to stop chasing the Joneses then turn around and seem to tell us to chase a different set of neighbors. And I'm not sure that keeping up with these people is making us any happier either. And that's what I want to talk about. I'm Ben with the YNAB team, and this is Sketchy Advice. Nothing in here. So this video was inspired by an article I saw in CNBC titled, "Most Americans Say This Financial Milestone Makes You an Adult." Can you guess what it is? Is it opening an IRA? Is it making your first budget? Is it moving out of your parents' house? Let's find out. About 3/4, or 76% of Americans say that coming off a parent's cell phone plan is one of the ultimate signs of adulthood, according to a recent survey of over 2,000 adults by AT&T. Very interesting that AT&T, a provider of phone plans, found that most people think it's more responsible and grown up and cool to be on your own phone plan instead of the much cheaper option of sharing phone plans with your parents. Which, by the way, I could not find this survey anywhere. Not one article that references it links to the survey. I couldn't Google it. I couldn't find it on AT&T's website. I'm sure the study does say this, but like technically, for all I know, AT&T is just talking out their ampersand. But also, like, this seems like kind of a meaningless statistic. I know many people who are on their parents' phone plans, but that doesn't mean they're not paying for their phone. It's generally cheaper per line to have a bunch of people on one plan, so they just pay their share of their plan because that makes things cheaper for both the parent and the kid. Not to mention that switching phone plans tends to be like a nightmare. So this is more about like savings and convenience than like an ultimate sign of adulthood. Gosh, I love that wording, ultimate sign. I'm thinking about like all the milestones I've been through as an adult of like graduating from college and getting married and having kids and like getting into my career and everything. And after all that, going to my parents and being like, it's time to get me off the cell phone plan. And them just being like, our little boy's all grown up. It's so weird. Isn't that weird? That's so weird. Sure, AT&T. But here's where it gets really interesting. Roughly 2/3, or 66% of those polled, also say they believe adult children should aim to reach this financial milestone by age 21. Okay. However, of those who pay their own cell phone bill, most waited until age 27, and 18% didn't start paying for their plan until age 40 or later. Isn't that interesting? Here's the thing that's supposed to be like an ultimate sign of adulthood. If you want to finally stop being a child, you do this, and you're supposed to do it, according to the majority of people, by this age. And then also, the majority of people don't do it by that age. Not even close. And this was a really interesting read because it reminds me of like in my early 20s when I got really into reading personal finance blogs, specifically FIRE blogs. Which, if you don't know, FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. Which always bothered me that like one is like a concept and the other is an imperative. Like just call it Financial Independence, Early Retirement. But I guess people just didn't want to call it the FIERE movement. FIERE. Dude, that's totally going to be my next D&D character. Like FIERE, the elf who's trying to retire early at age like 750. Oh, that sounds fun. But whenever I would read these blogs that were supposed to teach me how to like be financially successful, I just remember always feeling behind. And like, no joke, these bloggers would be like, here's my simple formula to financial success. I start by hitting my 401k match, then maxing out my IRA, then maxing out my HSA, then going back and maxing out my 401k, and then I invest all the extra money I have left over into investments that will be taxed, but that's okay because I have all this tax-free stuff that I built up. And I'd be reading this stuff just being like, I'm not doing that. And of course, within the FIRE movement especially, like a ton of these bloggers were like really high paid tech people who were willing to work like 60-hour weeks in order to retire at age 35. And that's great. I'm not knocking that at all. Good for them. That's clearly what makes them happy. But I was reading those blogs as like a bank teller who would need to put in like a 300-hour week to equate to the amount of money these people were getting. Like, have you ever read one of those articles that's like, here's the average net worth for people your age, see how you compare? I literally never feel good after reading one of those articles. Like, if one of those articles was a person and they came up to me at a party, they wouldn't be at a party. They'd be too busy trying to like move their LLC into a shell corporation for tax purposes. Like, when I look at this, how am I supposed to feel? At least this article shows you the average and the median net worth for people your age, which is a pretty stark difference. And the reason they do that is because the average can be skewed by people who have really, really insanely high atypical net worth for their age. They even say you may want to focus on the median net worth number, as it is less affected by those who are extremely rich. Well, then why show me the average then? And why is the subtitle of this article, "How do you measure up?" Like, what are we talking about? What are we doing? We are constantly told by personal finance people to not try to keep up with the Joneses. Don't measure your quality of life based on the stuff or the vacations that someone else has. But then we're immediately turned around and we point at the Dow Joneses or whatever, and we're like, but you do need to have the exact habits and net worth of these people. At least that's what you need to do if you want to be successful. Don't you want to be successful? I think maybe you do. And to make it worse, nobody can agree on what the Dow Joneses actually do. You need to have at least a month of savings in the bank. Actually, you need to have 3 to 6 months of savings in the bank. Oh, sorry. You need to have at least 8 months of savings. But also, don't save too much because you need to put as much money into retirement as possible so you can retire a millionaire instead of, dying destitute. So you should probably put as little down on a house as possible when you buy a house, because you are buying a house, right? You're not going to not buy a house. You're not going to not build equity, right? Even though after repairs and taxes and all those things, a lot of people could plug their numbers into a rent by calculator and figure out that they would be just as well off renting as they would be buying a house. Which reminds me, you need to be totally debt-free as quickly as possible. And one great way to do that is actually to put down more than 25% on a house, because did you know you pay more? You should really think about putting down more on a house. You are buying a house, right? Either you are chasing after this kind of weird, ethereal, ideal person that keeps shifting because of all the various conflicting advice around finances, or you're looking at a real person who's found success and trying to emulate them, even though in many cases the reason they are as successful as they are is because they've built a career out of telling people how to be successful. Hi, Robert. It is the most human thing in the world to compare yourself to someone else. We have friends that will go see them and they'll just talk about how frugal they are and how they do so many things DIY. And I just look at all the money they're saving and how conscientious they are. And I go, man. But then we'll also go hang out with friends who are like living large and having big experiences and making big splurges. And I'll be like, man. Like, it doesn't matter if you're looking at someone who's being more frugal or more minimalist or more optimized or more better at self-care or whatever it is. It's just so easy to look at yourself and feel like, I'm behind somehow. And we don't stop to ask ourselves, like, are we even playing the same game? What does that person care about? What are their goals? And what are they doing to pursue those goals? And do those look anything like mine? Just like you can't measure your quality of life by comparing possessions, you also really can't measure quality of life by just looking at someone's savings rate or their net worth. Because it depends on what you're trying to do with your life. And I think a lot of us just accept this feeling of being behind as being normal. It's just part of getting better with money. And I don't think that has to be true. And don't get me wrong, I think there's a ton of value at looking at how other people live and how they spend and what philosophy they live by. Looking at someone whose life looks so different than mine is a good way to reflect on the choices I've made and whether those are conscious or whether those are habits or whether I want to keep those or whether I want to change those. I think there is a good, healthy way to process all the various advice we get about personal finance. And it's something I learned back in my freshman Intro to Philosophy class. In that class, we read a lot of different thinkers who had really different ideas about how the world should be or what the world is like. And the way my professor talked about it is like, in this class, we're going to be constantly putting on and taking off hats. So today we're putting on our Nietzsche hat and looking at something and trying to figure out what Nietzsche would think of it. And then we're going to take that hat off and we'll put on our Hegel hat or our Plato hat or some other dead guy. And I think we can do the same thing with all these personal finance recommendations. We can put on that hat, see the world through that perspective, while bearing in mind that we are wearing a hat, and this hat might not actually fit our head. All these personal finance people out here, including me, by the way, are all playing our own games. And the question that you need to focus on is, what game am I playing? What are the goals that I have? A great tool for helping you to center your perspective and your priorities is what we at YNAB call the 5 questions. These questions are designed to help you, whenever you get money, to make sure those dollars are going toward the things you actually care about. What does this money need to do before I get paid again? You're making sure your bases are covered, that you're not setting yourself up for a late fee or water being shut off or whatever. Are there any larger, less frequent expenses I need to prepare for? You're making sure that you're not just looking at the immediate moment, but you're looking down the road at what you know is coming. Do I want to put anything toward next month? You're building in breathing room that gives you room to maneuver, whether that's being a month ahead or 12 months ahead. What goals, big or small, do I want to save for? You focus on the things that you really care about, things that bring you joy or bring you a ton of satisfaction, and making sure that your money is going toward those things and they're not just being left behind. And finally, is there anything I want to change? Have my priorities or my circumstances shifted in such a way that actually my dollars would work better over here? When you are infusing your money with that kind of intention and reflection, you are constantly reinforcing and centering around the things that you care about. Which, trust me, is going to make you feel a lot more confident when AT&T tells you that you need to get off your family's phone plan. No, you don't need to spend all your money trying to keep up with the Joneses, and you also don't need to spend all your time and energy trying to keep up with the Dow Joneses. We don't need to frame personal finances always looking at the butt of the person who is ahead of you in life. Personal finance isn't about butts, and it's not about what Bloggerman or Boss Babe or whoever thinks you should do, and it's not about what 66% of AT&T customers think you should do. It's just about you. Case closed.